What does Genshin Impact actually mean? This game has a pretty large amount of dialogue in it across the various cutscenes, character stories, and voice lines, but we never actually see Genshin Impact said in any of these. This isn't that unusual for games. I mean, I don't remember reading The Legend of Zelda in any games from the series. But the thing is, even in games like that, the player knows what the title means and understands how it relates to the game itself. Whereas in Genshin Impact, we are left completely in the dark. Well, I've done some research and I will try my best to explain its meaning. The word Genshin is taken from the Japanese language. It's not really a Japanese word necessarily, it simply combines the kanji for original and god. When read together, it is pronounced Genshin. Yep, so the accurate pronunciation is technically Genshin, but I honestly think that Genshin sounds a lot more natural when speaking English and not Japanese. So now you might be thinking, wait, isn't MiHoYo a Chinese company? Yes, they are, but the Chinese and Japanese language are similar in that the Japanese kanji are taken from Chinese. Therefore, these characters also mean original god in Chinese, but it is instead pronounced Yuan-shen. So why did MiHoYo decide to take the Japanese name over the Chinese name? Interestingly, they did the same thing with their previous game, Honkai Impact 3rd, albeit with a slight alteration. My two theories are that either A, Japanese words are simply easier to say for English speakers, or more likely B, Japanese is more familiar to a global audience because of the popularity of anime. Now that you kind of have an idea of the origin behind the word, what does it mean in terms of the game? To answer this, I'm going to look into the game's Japanese translation. What I'm going to talk about also mostly applies to the native Chinese translation, I just happen to be more familiar with Japanese. In the Japanese version, the naming convention for the most important in-universe terms revolves around the character for God, read as Kami when by itself. Vision is Kami no Me, directly translating to Eye of God. Gnosis is Kami no Kokoro, directly translating to Heart of God. As you would expect, the Anima Archon is Kaze no Kami, God of Wind. The God of Salt from Zhongli's story quest is a bit different in that it is Shio no Majin, which is an example of how gods that aren't the 7 Archons are considered demon gods. This is something that is completely lost in translation to English. That brings us to Genshin, which is translated in English as Allogene. You might not even remember that word because it was mentioned once by Venti at the end of the game's Mondstadt chapter, but it refers to anybody that owns a vision. These people have the potential to ascend to godhood. Knowing this, a better translation for Genshin might be proto-god because it is referring to the lowest form of a god. Yep, that means that the characters you play as and wish for are Genshin, with the exception of the 7 Archons and the Traveler. I actually think that Allogene is a very good translation for Genshin, as the word refers to a half-human, half-divine. So why isn't the game localized as Allogene? Well, it is very likely that it is simply due to trademark licensing. One more thing I thought I'd mention real quick is that Genshin was the name of a well-known Japanese Buddhist priest of the Tendai sect. To very briefly summarize his beliefs, he was an advocate for meditative Nembutsu, which would bring about enlightenment in the present life and rebirth in the Pure Land, which was basically a paradise for gods and men. While this can relate to the game, namely Celestia, the divine realm above gods, I don't think it's as relevant. Alright, how about the second half of the game's title? I looked all over for what the significance for Impact could be in both Genshin and Honkai, but I found nothing. In the Asian versions of the game, there isn't even a second word present, so without any evidence, here's my assumptions for what it could mean. 1. Given the definition noun of forceful contact or onset, Impact might have been tagged on to give the audience the impression that these are action-focused games, which makes sense since Honkai Impact 3rd is a beat-em-up style game. 2. The second definition of impact is noun, the force of impression of one thing on another, a significant or major effect. In Honkai Impact 3rd, a Honkai is a catastrophic event which would obviously have huge impacts. The word was then borrowed and put on Genshin, possibly because they share the same multiverse, or to let players know that they are both games by MiHoYo. 3. Once again using the second definition, the impacts could be the impressions that the main characters of the games leave on other characters and the whole world. Well, that's all for my findings. I could be spot on or I could be completely off with these, who knows. Anyways, thank you for watching.